everyone, Happy New Year! If you're new to my channel, my name is April. I make sewing and DIY fashion videos, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on a new video from me. So for this week's video, I had the honor of working on a client's wedding dress. She wanted to wear her mom's old wedding dress on her special day and asked that I make some minor alterations to the gown. This is Kaycee in her mom's wedding dress. It already fits her, so that makes my job a lot easier. She doesn't want the puffiness at the shoulders, very outdated, and she doesn't want the neckband along with some of the mesh that's on the chest. She kind of just wants the sweetheart bodice look. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to Kaycee for trusting me with your mom's dress, and let's get started. Since she wants the neckband removed along with some of the mesh on the chest, I thought it helped to add in some boning into the bodice to help hold the dress up. So the first thing I'm doing is seam ripping the bodice from the skirt, and I'll also have to remove the piece of lace on top as well. I left the zipper intact because I already have access to all the bodice seams and won't need to remove the zipper. I also went ahead and removed the sleeves and the shoulder pads that were inside. This took the longest because there were a lot of overlapping stitching and I had to take my time to avoid creating holes in the fabric. Here I'm marking the top of the bodice because the bodice seam is more of a dart, so it doesn't fully go up to the top. It's just a reference so I know how to line up my boning. This is some plastic boning inside a casing, and you'll want to measure and cut the boning to match each bodice seam. And you'll want to cut them a little longer than the actual seam because you can always trim it more later. The bodice has 6 seams, so boning will be added to the princess seams, and side back seams. All of the seams beside the side seams are hidden underneath, so I'll be flipping the bodice over to access the lining seam allowance. To sew the boning on, I'll be sewing it to the seam allowance so no extra stitch lines show through the other side. For the side seams, the raw edges are actually exposed inside, so it was a little easier to attach the boning to the seam allowance. The side back seam was in a really tight space, so I actually had to hand sew the boning in for that section. Once the boning is secure, slide the plastic piece out a little to trim it to fit the bodice. That way it's not in the seam line, or you might break a needle when attaching the skirt to the bodice. Now we can pin the bodice back to the skirt. Before I separated the bodice and skirt in the beginning, I made sure to mark where the bodice seams lined up with the skirt so I know how much gathers go in each section. Sew the skirt and bodice together, and after that I serged the raw edges to clean everything up. This was how the dress was originally constructed, so make sure to pay attention to that before taking the dress apart. Moving on to the sleeves. I undid all the gathering on top, and after fitting the sleeves on Kaycee, we decided that taking in the sleeves from the underarm seam and at the top of the sleeves would help make it appear less puffy and allow us to keep all the original lace design as well. After the sleeves, the scariest part was cutting the neckline. While Kaycee wore the dress, I marked the neckline on the mesh. We left additional seam allowance just in case, and it was a good thing because some of the mesh actually needed to be kept to hold some parts together. Once the neckline was cut, I was able to have her try the sleeves on and pin them in place. I originally pinned the sleeves on the edge of the original shoulder seam, but it made Kaycee's shoulders too broad and wide looking, so we moved it in more, and it ended up looking way better. With the sleeves pinned in place, I marked the location of it onto the bodice to help me remember where it's supposed to go. Now I can evenly mark the sleeve seam onto both sides of the bodice and evenly pin the sleeves right sides together on. It takes a few tries to line everything up, but after that you can go ahead and sew the sleeves onto the bodice. I marked my seam lines on the sleeves and the armhole, so as I'm sewing, I just match the lines up and sew on top of it. Lastly, to clean up the raw edges around the armhole, I cut a strip of white tulle and sewed it on like bias tape. And my camera died without me knowing, so here's a little recreation of what I did. Basically, you're sewing this like a double fold bias tape. So I'm sewing one edge down first, and then I can flip it over to cover the raw edges, tucking the other side under and stitching the other side down as well. And I'm finished. Here is the before and after of the dress. With the leftover neckband we cut off, I gave it back to Kaycee, and she actually used it to embellish the center front of the neckband for more coverage, which I think turned out so cute. She told me she took little scissors to cut out the little shapes she liked the best and added them to the dress. This was such a fun project and a great way to update an old dress without changing too much about it. Thank you to Kaycee for allowing me to share these beautiful photos from your wedding day, and congratulations! As usual, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on a new video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!